All right, welcome back. This is Nick again. We are learning Microsoft Project. So today we're going to talk about how to start sequencing activities and adding logic. We're going to talk about how to update our percent complete and then how to set a baseline so we can compare our progress later. So we've got our my project file open here, and you'll see we just have our basic 10 construction activities in that we're kind of where we left off at. We got a basic WBS to it. Not a lot of info here. So let's start thinking about how we can sequence these activities. So remember, there are four types of relationships we have, which is finish to start, start to start, start to finish, and start to start. So we're primarily going to focus around finish to start today, and we're not going to be using any lag. If you're utilizing lag, that means you're missing an activity that's not being communicated to someone. So remember, don't use lag when you're doing this, but we're going to do a very simple way to show that today. So these are already roughly in the order that they would occur in the sequence of a construction project, and we've got our first one set here, which shows kind of the overall duration. But like, let's say our bidding starts on today, 10/10/23. So we go 10/10/23. You'll notice these are all manually scheduled. So the first thing we're going to do is go change these all to auto scheduled. We should be able to change these here. No, we're going to change them one by one. Very quickly, auto scheduled, auto scheduled, auto scheduled. If you remember last time we talked about, we forgot to change the little thing down here to set them all future tasks to be auto scheduled. So now we've got all our tasks set to be auto scheduled. Let's run through and think about what this is going to take. So you'll notice when we hit auto schedule, this bumped them all up against the baseline and gave us all a start activity. So now let's start to sequence these things. So we start the sequence by utilizing our predecessors column. If you like to think about it from the successor point of view, you can always add a successors column too. When you add a predecessor to it, it naturally gives it a successor as well. So I oftentimes suggest that people use only one or the other, but if you feel more comfortable understanding what comes after something, you can use this successor column. But I recommend the predecessor one because that's kind of creating that customer relationship of what is this fulfilling. So bidding has no predecessor to it. That's the first activity, so that one can sit right at 918. But then let's talk award contracts. So award contracts would come after bidding, so that would have a predecessor too. And you'll see right here on the right hand side, it automatically linked that and then updated the date based on the duration there. So mobilizing comes after contracts, so that would be activity 3, which your predecessors are just the line item right here. Even if you rearrange these through different views, these will automatically update to it because it's linking to the actual line item, not a specific line on here. So you can do 3, and you'll see it updates for that one to start on the next working day following that. Concrete foundations, that's naturally going to follow when we mobilize. Structural steel will follow that. So you'll see we're starting to build our overall duration right here, which we can stretch this out so we can see how these are growing as well. Building enclosure will come after structural steel in this example. But here we have a couple options of what we can do. So you don't actually have to go put all these in necessarily the right order for them to sequence. This allows you the ability to understand what has predecessors. So in order to do the building MEPF rough-in, we probably need a couple things to be done. So we need the building enclosure to be done for sure, but maybe we also need the structural steel to be done. So that would be one that we could include as well. So item number 6, because we need a structure as well as a building enclosure for it. So that will make both of those a predecessor to the activity. And you'll notice too, all these are automatically defaulting to a finish to start relationship as well. So you can have multiple predecessors to something. You can also have multiple successors as well, which if you make something predecessor in multiple places, it'll automatically give it the multiple successors that correlate to it. So interior finishes, those will come after the interior MEPF rough-in. A question I commonly get from students is, how do I know how far back do I go with predecessors? Is, for instance, in order to have interior finishes, do I need to list the interior MEPF, the building enclosure, the structural steel, the concrete foundations? You generally want to list just the directly preceding activities that would be a handoff to that activity happening. So the bidding, for instance, would not be a direct handoff to starting interior finishes. There's a lot of activities that happen in between those two. So you would only want to focus on the ones that are a direct handoff. So your building enclosure and your MEP rough-in, those are two things that would happen before you start doing finishes. They both need to be complete in order for you to do finishes. So those would be both a direct handoff to it. So for interior finishes, for instance, that would be one that we could also say would be building enclosure being a predecessor to that too. So what I just popped up here is this task information window, which this gets a lot more down into the details about a task. So you can go to your predecessor field right here, and you can also add line items here, and it'll input them as well. If you are trying to use a different type of relationship here, you can select a different type of relationship here. You also have your lag column, which, as we said, we are not using because, like I said, if you're utilizing lag, if say you were going to start the building enclosure, or if you were to start the interior finishes, a lag of 10 days after MEPF rough-in, why are you doing that? There's almost always an activity that's missing in there if you're showing lag. So just whatever you're lagging it for, just create the activity and put it in your sequence. So when somebody goes and picks up your schedule and reads it, they can understand what the difference was. Finally, we'll do our site improvements. Our site improvements, that can come after interior building. We'll say after interior finishes and building enclosure. And then punch list can come after a couple different things. So after our site improvements are done, our building enclosure is done, and our interior finishes are done. Oh, I didn't type in a whole number there because I put a period, so that should be a comma. So if you type in something wrong, it'll also give you that as well. So what we have now is a complete schedule. So you'll see here how it sequenced everything out, and it shows the logic of how the schedule flows through. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we update the percent complete. So as you go and start building your project, you'll eventually start to have a total percent complete of how long something took to get done. And so you'll want to be able to track that progress. So you'll go to add new column right here. You can just type percent complete. It's actually the percent sign, not the word percent. So you'll want to go there. So you'll see these are all 0% right now. So for instance, if I was to say bidding was 50% of the way done, you'll notice that my Gantt bar over here has a line growing through the middle of it that shows how far well along that is. You track your percent complete to try and figure out how far along in the process an activity is to be incomplete. This gets along with actualizing your schedule that we're going to talk about more in future videos. But I just want to show you guys today how to add that column because that'll become important in the near future here. So we've got our activities, we've got them linked, and we started to understand a little bit about relationships. Now we have to think about how do we compare this schedule to future iterations. So say for instance, we are updating this schedule here today on October 10th, and then when we come back on November 10th, a month later, we want to understand how our schedule compares to it. You do that by setting what is called a baseline. So a baseline takes your schedule as a moment in time, and it gives you a point to compare in the future how far off or how far on track you are. So what you need to do is every time you update your schedule, you want to set a baseline to establish your variance in your schedule. To set a baseline in Microsoft Project, you go up here to your project tab and you go to this little button right here, which says set baseline. It's really that simple. So you go in here, click select baseline. You'll go to set baseline. You'll have a bunch of variations right here, which you can use for future updates. I like say baseline 10 baseline 1, which this is just your entire starting project 1, and just hit OK. So now you've set your initial baseline for the project. So let's say we come in here and then it's a month later and we realized, hey, we had some logic here where we couldn't actually start, this relationship was wrong and we couldn't do this until after, say 9 was done, and then this is actually going to be 45 days, this is going to be 15 days, this is going to be 60 days. Notice how all our dates changed within that time. So what we can do is we can add a new column that shows how our different baselines compare to one another. So you can say baseline 1, you'll notice here, so you have all your different baselines filled here. So you can have your baseline duration, and you can see baseline 1 duration was, or show your original durations that was in that baseline. So that can be a great place to see how these compared over there. There's also a number of things you can do with setting, a comparison, baseline 1 to baseline 2. You can make a formula to look at them. So this allows you to kind of compare those different things in time. So today we talked about how to add logic to a schedule, how to add a percent complete to it, and then how to set a baseline for it. Going forward, when we talk about updating our schedule, all these things will become more important. That covers all we had to talk about today. Hope you guys enjoyed this and have a great day.